Hello and welcome to another episode of Elevate, a DBNC leadership podcast where we have conversations with non-traditional and diverse leaders. Enjoy! My name is Christian Fox, and today I am joined by a very special guest, Gloria, a.k.a. Glowz. Glowz, how are you doing today?
I'm good.
Good, awesome. I'm glad you're here. Thank you so much for coming on the show. So I always just want people to get a sense of who you are and what you do. So why don't you just go ahead and just talk a little bit about yourself?
So my name is Gloria O'Koy. My artist name is Glowz. I've been writing for about 21 years, and spoken word probably 6 to 8 years. I'm trying to remember. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. So what got you started on this whole writing journey?
Oh, writing from since kindergarten, but I was saying grade 3, the creative writing class, and that's how I expressed myself. And my very first story I wrote was a 28-page about sea snakes.
Okay. Do you remember what the gist was of that story?
It was almost like Discovery Channel, but in written form.
Oh, that's really cool. And what made you write about sea snakes?
I've always been interested in just the daily life of animals.
Okay.
And Discovery Channel had a special on sea snakes.
Right.
So I was like, let me just write about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So before we shift gears, any facts that you remember that you think everyone should know about sea snakes? Because I don't know anything about them at all.
They're venomous.
They're venomous? Okay. Venomous. That's really good to know. Yeah, that's awesome.
I changed a lot of details in that one. I think with that, it was more community. Mm-hmm. I don't know in real life if they're more solitude or community, but I made it community.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
I was exaggerating the numbers. So.
Right. I love that. So you wrote a memoir, a story called Actually, can you help me say that?
Kintsugi.
Yes, a Memoir and Hood Chronicles. Can you talk a little bit about those pieces?
Yes. So Kintsugi is the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery. So even in a society that we're in, if we broke a mug, what's the first thing that we do?
Yeah, we throw it out.
We throw it out, right?
Yeah,
but have you ever have a chance if you've broken something that's like really fragile, but it's in like big pieces that is almost like a puzzle piece?
Right.
Yeah, so in Japan, they actually bring it to the potter and they use like platinum, silver lining or gold lining, like a paste, and it put the pieces together. And it symbolizes that there is beauty even in our brokenness.
Oh, that's really cool.
And each fragment tells a story.
Okay. Yeah. So what was kind of the focus? Like, was that just the overall theme of the memoir?
It's about some of the things I was going through in my life. Mm-hmm. Kintsugi Memoir, the idea came to mind for several years, and it took me 5 years to write it out.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was actually going through the journey while I was writing it
as
out.
you were writing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. And do you have and I will ask about the Hood Chronicles too, and if there's a similar process. But do you have a specific process that you use when you're writing about your experiences, or just the general writing process?
My process, I definitely write when I am commuting, and I'm writing when I'm in nature. Mm-hmm. I do a lot of free writing, so I've spent years just writing one experience, but in different stories, because I live in my stories. So how I talk, every description, I'm immersed in the entire story. So that's my process, and it's from people's conversations, not eavesdropping, but there's some conversation that really stands out.
Right, yeah, you want to listen to.
You're
or
like, especially commuting before the phones. People used to interact with each other while waiting for the bus stop, especially if you're waiting for the night bus.
Yeah.
And I met a lot of people, actually, especially in Brampton and Saga. I met a lot of people, and we talked about life. Yeah. Met from people from different walks. And I don't know, I think it's more easy to open up some experiences with strangers than people that's close to you. So I was writing that, I was documenting that in my stories, and I was remembering what they looked, how they talked, and in my characters, every single character has a piece of me and probably 17 other people I met in my life.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Now, when you talk about strangers, do you think that's because Because people, you're less likely to judge someone when you meet them for the first time. You're always going to give them the benefit of the doubt, whatever it is, as
Yeah.
opposed to someone that you know. So it's maybe
Yeah,
that
it's
why?
like no strings attached. It's like an outside perspective. Because sometimes when for example, if I was to talk to my parents about some of the experiences, they may make me remarks not out of like, I don't know, like resentment or negative like intentions, but it's out of love. But sometimes how they portray or how it comes out, it might hurt my feelings, and it's coming from an inside. It's more like, oh, you're my kid, so like you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that, you shouldn't think like this. They have like a path and expectations for you, but when it comes to strangers, you're meeting people, you'll know what they went through. So, and I find when I was meeting a lot of folks and we're talking about folks, there were similarities in different stuff. So I still saw the humanity. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's. I think that's really interesting because I think we often talk about similarities, but when you talk about similarities in differences, I think that's a really unique angle. Yeah. So I'm so curious about when you're talking about you're writing on commutes, you're writing in nature. Are you a pen and paper person, or
Yes,
are you get out my phone and type in notes?
Definitely a pen and paper person. Especially with my most inner thoughts, I rather write it on pen and paper. So if I'm having a rough day, a heavy day, if it's a story that's close to home, I rather write it on pen and paper, get everything out, and then I go over again with free writing on the laptop, the phone, and then I do the final copy. So now everything is like fine tuned.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a long process.
Yeah, how long does that usually take? I know you said you were writing the memoir for about 5 years.
Yeah, that was it was 5 years to like write the new pieces because I was going through some stuff, but it was about 17 years of work that I had to rewrite, put in different perspectives now, because what I wrote when I was in grade 1 is totally different when I was in grade 12. It's totally different when I'm like 22, 24.
Yeah.
And if I were to rewrite Kintsugi Memoir, there'll be more stuff.
Right.
Because I'm in my 30s now, right? So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's quite interesting because I've always been fascinated at how people write because I've always thought, oh man, it'd be really great to write a book, but I just can't imagine like how challenging that must be, especially if you're writing about your lived experiences.
Yeah, and since young, they always say as a writer, don't expect your first book or everything until you're like 65. Like there's no like time limit because there's some certain careers. Okay, maybe there's a time limit where it's like you make or break it.
Yeah.
But with writer, your first book could be when you're 80,
Yeah.
when you're 90.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so like, don't rush the process. Start from now. I started some of my books that I wrote. I was writing it since I was 8 years old. It's still not done. I changed a lot of stuff because how I view the world is really different from how I was viewing the world when I was younger, even though I was exposed to a lot of things. Because there's things I didn't understand. And now I understand. And I want to put that because I know the purpose why I wrote my books. I wanted to be in the hands of people of different journeys of life. So I'm not just going to write it just straight and narrow. It's going to be different things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's I love a lot of what you said, but I'm so curious about Hood Chronicles. Can you talk a little bit about the story and like just the story behind the story and the experience of writing it?
Yeah, so Hood Chronicles actually took 8 months. It was hilarious. But the journey itself was definitely hilarious. Hood Chronicles was the reason why I even got into the phone because my laptop broke 1 month in.
Oh no!
1 month in, and let me tell all my writers: don't write on the phone. Don't write it. You're gonna lose like your sight. You're gonna freak out. You're gonna be like, "Oh, I lost my eyesight." It's just because you had your screen on full blast or too low, and yeah, it's not good for your eyes. But I was determined to finish it, and I was very fortunate. That time, I was doing my work placement at Yonge Street Mission with the Hope program. So they were working with youth that were dealing with were in conflict with the law, and pretty much like youth that were like in the shelter systems and the group homes and stuff. So in that field, there's usually days where it's completely hectic. There's no rest, and then there's down days. So my down days, my supervisor, Eddie Martinez, he actually gave me that space to actually use the laptop to actually work on my book.
Oh, that's
so
amazing.
I am forever thankful for him. I'm forever thankful for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that one, 8 months after, I had no laptop for the whole time. So it was, I was going to my friend's house. I was using a work laptop. I was going to the library. And that one pulled a lot of stories since I was 8. So you're seeing from 8 to roughly 25, 26 years old. So between that age, all those stories came. Some of them even younger, but I just kind of pushed it to 8. So the youngest story that you see is the 8-year-old character.
Okay. So what's the like if you had to give like the elevator pitch for like those for listeners who haven't read the books or like that sounds interesting, what would you say the elevator pitch is?
For Kintsugi is that your art will save lives. Your existence is a work of art. And for her Chronicles, it's based on the different experiences that people go through within the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area, and what it means to have a loved one incarcerated.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds like it would be a very like. Did it ever like get emotionally draining having to write those stories?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I can't imagine.
Oh yeah. Kintsugi Memoir, I almost deleted the manuscript. I stopped counting at 55 times. Her Chronicles, 157 times. I stopped counting after that.
Wow.
And then there's the stories that really reached out to people. I have put the stories in the trash bin. And my friend, Yin, who was helping me edit before we went to our editor friend, she would like kind of hit me in the head, be like, no, just make a folder. But the to be determined, do not throw their stories away.
Right.
Because I was starting to like, like it brought me back to a lot of things that I thought I was okay, but I was not okay. And I learned a lot about myself in that process.
Yeah, I can imagine. Any lessons you're comfortable, sharing with us? Maybe something that you learned and you're like, oh, thank God I learned that when I was writing this story.
I definitely would touch on grief. Grief was definitely a thing where I would say like I overwork a lot. My coping mechanism is to overwork and take on other people's stuff to suppress my own. But then I go to similar people with like similar stories, like if they lost my grandmother, lost maybe the relationship with parents, maybe dealing with PTSD. I would suppress my own, but then I would be gravitating towards other people.
Right.
So I learned about that. So the grief was that grief varies. It's not just a straight road. It's like a maze. So you could go through the 5 stages of grief, the 6 stages of grief. And sometimes you may not have completed the whole entire grief journey, even when your spirit leaves this world.
Right.
Right? And a lot of times it's hard for us to acknowledge because it's not really talked about, not like how our ancestors did. So, and I really started to understand what my grandmother was trying to do when she was still here. She prepared for her passing since I was preschool. So from as young as I could comprehend and remember, probably 4 years old, she always talked about she's going to go back to the sky. She's going back to the Lord, with her faith, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't understand it until she passed versus when my father passed 8 months after. Totally different experiences of grief. So even though I'm prepared for one person and I was still not in a great space, the next one completely traumatized me.
Right.
Right? So then I put that in the book, and I also and even how they were passing. Even some of them maybe my grandmother lived a good life. Like my grandma lived up to like 95. Wow. She had a good life. My father was 70, but I didn't talk to him for 10 years. But then I also have friends that I've lost to violence, and those are sudden. I have my friends who are in good health, next thing you know, they're in ICU. So these are different things. And then there's also grief about what does it mean to be a parent? I'm a parent. I'm grieving for like the things that I would want to when I was in my childhood, and maybe some of the traditions that were passed down to me that I didn't want to pass down to my children. Maybe some, like little things, like right, or big things that impacted me as a child. But because I was raised in that, sometimes I find myself doing the same thing to my child, for my children. So I'm also grieving for that. I'm also maybe grieving for the loss of culture, the loss of teachings. When my grandmother passed, I don't even do too much family dinners. I think the last time was 5 years or 7. I would say 7 years, but 5 years for a mini family dinner. But we don't go out no more as a family. I'm grieving for that. Maybe I'm also grieving for if I calculated and if I finished my school years, like exactly on the dot on what society has given us, I would have been able to graduate from university for her to attend. And that's something that she always told me when she was younger. But I didn't get to do that. My life was completely different. I had parenthood. I went through a lot of stuff. And when she passed, I was already 24. I could at least did my bachelor, at least a bachelor, at least graduate with a bachelor's, but I didn't. I never did. So her Chronicles brought back a lot of things, and it brought back even how we take on other people's grief because we want to suppress our own.
Right.
But in life, there's always going to be people, there's always going to be situations that are going to pull you back until you learn your lesson.
Yeah.
Every time, so...
That's really interesting that you touched on grief because I think I've talked about this before on the podcast, but I'm also in film school right now because I love film, I love video, and I love just creating stories. And one of the things I've been doing a lot has been either doing documentaries or writing stories about my mom and my own experience of losing her. And recently I did a mini documentary about grief, and this fact that I thought this happened 3 years ago. My mom passed from cancer, and I felt like, things were good. I felt like, okay, I was moving on with my life. But then again, I don't know if I've said this before on the podcast, but I recently got married to the love of my life, and she's amazing. But as I got closer to the wedding, I realized that I was still, hadn't fully ever finished grieving because I just desperately wanted my mom to be able to be there at my wedding. And then thinking, you talked about your grandmother, and I lost my grandparents my grandfather about 10 or 12 years ago now. Actually, both of them about 10, 12 years ago now. And I was really close to them. And so not having them at the wedding was really tough. So this is all to say, they're really, the one thing I've learned about grief, if we're talking about those experiences, that there really is no time limit. And I feel like what's interesting about, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but with society, I feel like if you lose a parent or you lose a grandmother or whoever, a loved one, generally speaking, you have 3 months of people are really supportive. They're there for you. They're going to, anytime they see you, they say, how are you holding up? How are you doing? But then they stop. Not that it's a negative thing because everybody has to move on with their life. And my friends are still, incredibly supportive. But it's almost like, okay, it's been 3 months. We don't need to worry about this person because they've dealt with it. But yeah, it's just amazing how different the experience is for different people, and that there really is no time limit. And the thing I find, I'll be fine for weeks at a time, and then something will happen. It will just make me burst into tears because it will make me think of some memory. So I think it's really interesting that you talked about grief and try to I'm trying to think of the right word, but you're able to sort of process it. I don't know if that's the right word in your writing, and you're able to maybe.
That's probably the best. Yeah, that's probably the best way for me to process. So even when I did even when doing therapy and everything, going through that, it's sometimes I just give my book to the therapist. I just give it to a counselor and just be here, this is the life. If there's anything that you can take out of it, just highlight it. We could talk about it. And even me talking about my book, is probably better than just asking, so tell me about you. Tell me about yourself. Yeah, it's
Dude,
in a therapy session, it's just like, I don't know, but I could tell you the backstory of this story, and then you could pull out who's Gloria. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, that's really unique. And that's actually an interesting way of just, instead of just, saying, because sometimes it is hard to talk about yourself, but when you talk about a story that you've written and the story behind that, it kind of makes it easier. But I'm so curious because, I have friends with an author, she self-publishes, and you were talking about self-publishing. What was that journey like?
Oh, it's a pricey one. Like it's a pricey one when it comes to like time and because in traditional publishing, all you have to do is just focus on the content. You battle it out with the editor because when you're going through a publishing place, a publisher, you're tackling their audience. They kind of know what their audience like. And then you as the writer, you know what you like. So you're battling out, but even the cost. So that's why I was really glad the first book took 5 years, because I was able to save up to have like the book cover being like water painted and then sent to me. Yeah, so like it was like I was glad. Her Chronicles, I was broke. I was broke. I had to do the pre-orders for me to even able to like print out the books. Then you have to go through all the logistics with like what kind of book cover, what kind of book binding, all that kind of stuff. That's why I always ask people that want to self-publish or even publish, what is your purpose, right? Because even with book binding, to get my books inside the institutions, I can't have any wired. I can't have any like spirals or whatever. It has to be what's it called? Total bind, full binded books.
Oh, okay.
Right? It has to be soft cover. I can't have hard covers because, for safety concerns, right? So, especially with her Chronicles, I had to make sure that I had enough to get that. And I think it's more on a pricier range. Because with the spirals and stuff, I could just print it out and just put the spiral together, the skeleton together, and then give it off, right? But if I knew the target audience, I have to consider all these things. So things like that. That's a whole other layer of things that I hadn't even considered. I thought of, okay, you always hear about, if you're publishing, you got to deal with the publisher, and they might say, we love your stuff, but you got to do this thing, or this isn't going to work with our audience. But having to actually figure out the logistics and considering, if you're dealing with an institution and you're dealing with, okay, well, it can't be hardcover because of safety concerns. Like that's something that I would never even thought about. Yeah, so that's why I always tell people, what is the purpose of your book? What's the target audience? And what do you want your audience to gain out of your book? So my very first mentor, Whitney French, always told me that when I was working on my Kintsugi memoir. And I wrote it down, I thought about it, and I continued to make changes throughout like my writing journey. So yeah.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. I could talk to you about writing all day, but I also know you have a podcast called Let's Talk. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Let's Talk started, I want to say 2000, I think this is when everyone was kind of freaking out with the pandemic.
Right.
It was the beginning stages, we didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
I pretty much took this time that I've been noticing a lot of my friends who have been in and out of the system and stuff, and I wanted to highlight their the human side, because I always looked up to them. Other than the shenanigans they have got themselves involved in, they're the people that you could just sit by the waterfront and you could talk about life, and they can even give you the most wisest decisions, and you're just like, wait, where's this coming from, right?
Yeah.
So Let's Talk started, in the beginning, just before the pandemic hit like crisis level. It was two brothers. One brother was doing life, and there was a brother who was in and out. So I had a closer relationship or friendship with him, and I've seen him mentor youth without even trying. Because they just looked up to his music, they just looked up to him, and they always DM, probably talking about, oh yeah, I want to be in this lifestyle, blah blah, and he's just like, no, And he actually broke it down, and he has actually talked people out of suicide. So I really want to highlight him. So I did we've been talking about going on Instagram lives for a while. I think he went inside and then when he came out again, he stayed inside for maybe a year or something, just before 2 years. And then when he came out, we did it. We talked about it. We talked about who he is as a person, and I wanted to highlight all his potentials. I wanted to highlight his achievements, and he's an amazing storyteller. And he will give you all the components of what a great story is, from the humor to life lessons to the emotional parts to just the human core. And if you never knew his past or never knew whatever he was into, you would just see a human, a human that has like about 90 years of life in him. And it just, I guess, just sparked something, because I wanted to highlight people that maybe like other platforms, maybe they're not big enough, maybe they're not into what the trends are. And I don't want them to be forgotten. And, even when we talk about incarceration, like, we talk about the forgotten. That was a huge term, right? Because it's just like, because incarceration is the closest thing to the graveyard. Yeah. And we even spoke about, death and mourning and grieving process, where after 3 months, people just forgot. And like incarceration, like, I seen folks, like friends for like childhood and stuff, after 3-5 years, forgot about them, or they just couldn't do it no more. Like, there's other stress, right? Like, which we could touch on maybe another day, or we could talk about it today. And I didn't want society to just see what media portrayed him as a monster, because he's not. Yeah. He's not. He's way more than that. And I want to talk about the different layers of humanity, because for example, with me and you, we only meet one layer, right? What we present ourselves. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could be different with your partner, your family. I could be different with my friends. So everyone sees different sides of us. And I see a very loving person in him. And even his brother that's doing life, I see a totally different person. And I know, like, I always hold accountability for actions and stuff, even though sometimes it hurts to hold people accountable, but they're still humans. I still see the human in them, because I've seen that they know the different human emotions, and media will never show that, because they want to just portray and continue to dehumanize. So
yeah, I think that's a huge problem that we get in our society, where it's if you go to prison, regardless of what you did, it's like, well, you're a bad guy, you probably did something that you deserve to be in prison now. And I think we really do dehumanize inmates, and especially those coming out. Like, okay, well, there's like, I don't know if you've had a lot of experience, or like in those conversations of rehabilitation comes up, but I just feel like it's just like you're thrown in prison and then you're released, and then, oh, that's it. But it's like, no, you went through a whole experience in there. And then people who are doing life, like the person you're talking about, like, okay, I don't know what happened, and maybe they deserted it, maybe they didn't, but it's like, it's hard to fathom, like, what's that experience actually like when you're just doing life and you're in prison and there's like no hope. Yeah. And then the society just thinks, well, you're a bad person, go to prison and just be like, don't be here anymore. So I feel like just as an overall thing, we have a long way to go in how we even deal with incarceration and those that have been incarcerated or are currently incarcerated.
Yeah, so I'm really glad that Let's Talk during that time, in 2020, because a lot of people were making remarks because of the restrictions and stuff. So So when that happened, that's when I was like, no, I really wanted to like highlight. And I know when it came to the advocacy, the activism, it was a big push because of what was going on within the walls, even with the outbreaks and everything, and a lot of things got exposed. And I think that was the one time that people came to like some kind of understanding. They weren't really thinking about the worst of the worst. It's only now that like the world opened up, everyone's going back to their daily routine. Now the remarks are starting to get back again, and I've seen the change. I see the change. Yeah.
Do you mean like you were talking about the isolation that people would feel?
Yeah, like the
when you're,
isolation.
Like, stuck at home,
Yeah.
you're in COVID, you can't go anywhere.
Yep.
That now you're starting to see. Obviously, it's a very different thing than actually being in prison, but you're starting to get a sense of what that isolation might be like.
Yeah, even
like
a tiny bit. Yeah,
level,
even restrictions, even being told what to do, and even just being away from your loved ones, especially for those like who really can't like risk with their health, right? Because they have autoimmune. Is it autoimmune system? You know what I mean?
Autoimmune.
Yeah, autoimmune, right? So
I
like they
think
really
so, yeah.
can't take the risk because like if they catch it, it's really bad, right? So they have a sense of what loneliness is, and I remember everyone was trying to buy pets, the dogs and stuff. So right now the humane society and dog shelters are just like, okay, like everyone's just like ditching these dogs right now because they realize that it takes a lot of work. But just to see the desperation that people was striving for, like they can't deal with being alone. They're having mental breakdowns, and I'm like, this is not even scratching the surface.
Yeah.
And if you really look into incarceration, there's a lot of like when it comes to like substance, there's a lot of like domestic, there's even homelessness, or like even like there's no housing stability. There's just so many factors, but media and society will always pick the worst of the worst. And even then there is like things that you could do, breakdowns, while still holding people accountable for decisions, but also understanding. And I seen my friends, they like, especially when they do long sentence, you see like when they try and when they give up. They try and they give up because they keep getting shunned.
You mean when they come back out?
Yeah. Or even when they're trying to do their best inside. Like some of them have even tried pushing clothing lines. They're still trying to do their music. They're still trying to make business plans. And you can see where like they hit frustration when they feel like no one remembers them. And you see when some of them start to lose hope. It's like they try to push themselves, but they start to lose hope. And then in prison's a whole entire different culture too. So it's like you're dealing with a whole entire society with their troubles, with their politics, and how can someone find inner peace when there's like chaos everywhere? So
yeah, I used to work with prisons, but prior to this job, where I'd work with correctional officers who were in disputes, and the amount of stress that they went through and the prisoners went through and inmate, and it just seemed like just the whole culture, as you say, the whole culture is just so different, and it's just stressful for everybody, and you're always on edge. I can only imagine what it's like to be on the inside and you're on edge. You're there for a long time, and then like going back to COVID, when we were in COVID, yeah, we were all isolated, but yet there's still social media. We still had access to things, so we could still know what was going on the outside. But I imagine if you're in prison for a period of time, you maybe don't have the same access, and then by the time you come out, it's a whole different world that you're in.
Yeah,
depending on how
it's
long
like a time
the
vault.
sentence is.
Yeah, it's a time vault. Like the world moves on, and I even with with Let's Talk, I really wanted to find this lady again. I was doing I guess like writing workshops with a lifers group in anger management, and I still remember this lady. She got like 20 minutes late. I think 20 minutes late, and we're talking. Everything was fine. And I guess we were talking about like how was our day? Like it was our check-in. Completely had a mental breakdown because she just finished her 25-year bid. And she was on the bus, and like buses, they changed over the past like 10 years, 10, 15 years or something. Now you have to like push the button instead of like stepping on the steps to open the bus doors, right? Because she didn't know, she had a complete mental breakdown. Complete mental breakdown. And it's just like, these are the things that we take for granted. Like even like the subway system, the bus system, even the numbers. I remember, because I was stay-home mom for just only 2 years. Only 2 years. I come out, instead of the 199 express bus or the 39 like I'm seeing 939, and I'm like, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, what's this bus? I'm having a freak out, and I'm only just been here, even with all the access that I have, all because I was stay-home mom. And everything I was doing, it was walking distance. But when I started to get out again, to go to the podcast, different podcasts, doing different events, I was having a freak out session.
Yeah, because it's
freak out session, So I can't even imagine how she felt. So I really wanted to capture that. So yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So how often are you doing the podcast, and where can people listen to it, watch it, experience
it's just really on Instagram. I haven't really pushed it to the next level. I did have my YouTube page. I think it's called, I think it was like Glowy Talks.
Okay.
And you can actually see like little snippets of people. And I was asking questions, what makes you human? And then I asked different things like, when's the first time you learned about forgiveness, self-forgiveness? And people love to tell stories. They told stories about, but the main one was on Instagram with the G.L._GLOWZ. I did take a break from it for a bit, but I'm thinking of bringing it back because I do have some friends in Scotia and in Florida that wants to share a little bit more. And so.
Oh, that's amazing. I love it. And I definitely want to check that out. If you can and I think, if you can find leaving the YouTube page, we can throw that on our description and maybe throw it underneath us. So when you're watching it, you can be like, check it out.
Yeah.
So I think that'd be really cool.
Okay. Thank you.
One thing I did, actually, a couple things I wanted to touch on. One, because I know you're very fond of just building relationships, and it sounds like that's central to everything that you do. What do you think, in your experience, what do you think the most important thing or aspect of relationship building is?
Meeting people where they're at. Yeah, meeting people where they're at. It's definitely, I find for some folks, it may be challenging because of their own experience. Maybe they don't like people that's super closed off, but then on the other party, they're closed off because of trauma. So just meeting people where they're at. And when they're talking about like loving unconditionally, you could build relationships and love from afar. You could love from a distance. And also acknowledging that your time in a person's life and vice versa, there's a time slot, and don't feel no ways if it's only lasting for 1 year or 2 years, even for 5 seconds, for 15 years. You have made an impact in that person's life and vice versa. And when you come to terms and try not to project, I know it's hard, but try not to project your past onto the other person. Because I find with life, when you're building relationships, there's always somehow, some way that a lot of things that you have pushed under the rug will come back in the other person's, maybe their actions, their words, or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mean like something that's unresolved that...
Yeah, unresolved.
Either they can trigger something in you, or...
It could trigger, and be open. Don't push the other person to be open, but like just allow it just to grow organically. And relationship does take time. Even we could be getting along, we could be hanging out like for 5 hours or even like every day for the past 4 months. There's still layers to a person. So just take your time. Give something to work with. Like, don't be completely closed off, but give something to work with, something small, and just let it build. And don't force anything.
Yeah, I think those are good things, like all like good pieces of advice. And I think Yeah, just the time and letting things grow. I love this idea that like even if you spend 5 hours a day for 4 months, there's still going to be layers to that relationship that you don't know about. I think all those things are really helpful and critical. So one thing I do want to touch on before we get on to my last question, which I love asking our guests, is that you are a reporter for the Toronto Caribbean News. Yeah,
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about that and what that's been like?
It's been good. I've been doing more of their poetry, but there was one year I was doing stories, and it made me appreciate reporters a lot because it's not an easy task. Yeah, and then also even knowing like sometimes you just want to cover stories because this is what you're passionate about, but then you also have to make it in a way where you could captivate the audience. So that was definitely a task where I'm like, okay, let me go back to poetry for a bit. But it was good. I definitely love it. I've been doing it since 2020. So, and within the years, I'm like, it's amazing that my writing can get backed up by like a news, a news press. So it was pretty cool. And I'm just really thankful for Simone. Yeah, Simone honestly she always gave me tips. She's always provided opportunities, even though like, I feel like I'm not qualified, but she believed in me. She always believed in me since she first interviewed me. And I wouldn't change it for the world. I'm really happy I'm with them.
No, that's amazing. Now, for someone who's interested in, maybe in the reporting life, do you have any advice for them? Someone who's just starting out, maybe is even qualified, as you say, to do that?
I would say like just explore, travel, take this time to go into spaces that you usually won't be able to, or you wouldn't have thought of, and just expose yourself to different stuff. And I know when it comes to like reporting, especially when you first start off, you really want to push for your passion, but just expand your palette, just expand your mind. You will meet amazing people, you will meet amazing things. And like those stories will come to life. And I'm telling you, like something that you would never expect to have anything to do with your passions, there's some sort of like similarities, there's like connecting blocks. So
yeah, I love that. I love that idea of like, obviously focus on your passions to a degree, but like expand your palette. I think that's so, so important.
yeah.
Okay, so now for my favorite question. I love asking this, and I'm so excited to hear what you're going to say. But if you could go back in time and talk to yourself when you were 16 years old, what would you say to yourself?
Yeah, you're like that. I would say that you are enough. Your stories will impact many lives. These are just tumbling blocks. They're tribulations, but you already have your ancestors walking with you. Don't stay silent. Continue to speak and continue to walk in your truth, because you don't know who's watching, who needs to hear it. You don't know who's looking up to you. And always continue to love people, and don't let no trauma define who you are. They're just learning curves.
Yeah, I like so much of what you said, especially just touching on this idea that you have value, because I feel like, and I talk about this a lot, that when I was 16, and I feel like just anyone who's 16 years old, there's a lot of negativity around teenagers and like, oh, you're a child, you're being a teenager, you're being difficult, you're just doing this because you're a teenager, and there's not a lot of like value put in that. So I think it's so important to hear that, you know what, you have value. Walk in your own truth, but you have value.
Yeah.
So I think, that's so important. I think honestly, every child who, is growing up, or maybe someone who's 16 years old right now, needs to hear that.
Yeah.
Sure. But I just want to thank you. Yeah, it's been a
Thank
really,
you for having me.
really great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, anytime, and you're welcome back anytime.
Okay. All right. I'll take your word for it.
Okay.
All right.